Hey everyone, welcome back to Intentional Guy. It's so good to see everyone back here. I got a friend of mine, Jason Brand, with me in the house tonight. Jason, how you doing?
I'm doing well, man. How you doing?
I'm good. I thank you so much for being here. I put a few of my friends on the spot because we're doing this 28-day challenge. Uh,
Okay.
and, and basically the challenge is uh, just to be cognizant of our life. Our podcast is called Intentional Guy, and for me, it was all my life coming together was all about. I realized I was just floundering everywhere, so that's where Intentional Guy came from. But we're doing the 28-day challenge for men and husbands, and but not just husbands too. We're for everybody, but really it's all about stories. Our stories are powerful. And so I brought a few friends on here that, I prayed over, and, I felt like God had some great stories that they can share. And Jason's one of those guys. Jason and I met, I don't even know how many years ago it was. Do you remember?
Yeah, we met a little bit before. I mean, I knew my wife knew your wife. They worked together.
Yep.
I met you. I think we had one dinner date, and then you actually the one that married us. So we would
Yeah.
have met sometime on or around the 2016. We were married for
Yeah.
two. I
Wow.
think we met one time before, and then a few weeks before, obviously, we spent a little time together talking about things and where we wanted to direct our marriage, and we had the joy of letting you marry us.
Yeah. Out on the beach. I got to do that.
That I thought for sure maybe I was making a bad decision with all the rain that came in a couple nights
Man,
before, but I tell you what, that day was perfect.
it was like there was nothing but rain, and then just for
I
their
mean, not just
wedding,
rain, but
yeah,
monsoon.
but the sun came out for their wedding as though it was meant to be, right?
Yep, that day
So,
that day let me know I was making the right decision. That's for sure.
and I remember, so one of the things I want to start off with Jason was Jason and they weren't going to church, and I don't somehow my wife and your wife, I don't know what made you guys decide to actually do it, but they came to our church uh, one Sunday morning, and uh, I, that's where probably one of the biggest changes in your life. I mean, you've had a lot of change. Getting married is a big change.
That's a lot. That was actually the easy. That was the easiest change. That was probably the smart. That's definitely the smartest decision I ever made. But I'm definitely best known as Mason's dad and Kristen's husband. So
Yep.
that's pretty sure that's my new name. I think that's what my driver's license says.
That's
But
what makes a good husband.
I must be doing something all right. She hasn't got rid of me yet. So
But I
no.
remember that
So
day that you came to Momentum. Amber
mhm.
said, "Pray for them." I think I was doing production. I can't remember if I was sitting with you guys or not. And
No, I don't believe you were.
yeah,
It
I
was
think I was.
that was the big show. That was our very first one was the year that Doug Baldwin spoke at Gulf Breeze High School. It was Easter. So the very first time we came was Easter, and like I said, the only Amber had been on, not when I say been on my wife, I don't mean rudely. She was doing the Christian thing, and hey, come to church, come check it out. This is for the place that people no perfect people allowed. And I was like, well, that means I can never go. I'm perfect. I'm just kidding, of course. But
No, he's not.
no, I'm not. Um, I'm a diehard football fan, so NFL football player comes to speak locally. I guess that was enough to, that was God's hook to get me in the building. He works all kinds of ways, and we came in with, all right, God, we're just a couple weeks away from getting married, and obviously with marriage, my wife and I met a little bit older in our lives. We were already in our mid 30s. Neither had been married before. Both grew up with everybody's kids hang on us like a jungle gym. We're not, even our
Hmm.
friends' kids call us aunt and uncle. So we knew that parenting was something we wanted to do pretty soon because, I mean, the clock was ticking. Not that God couldn't give you a healthy baby in your 40s or 50s. We just didn't want to be 92 years old watching our kid graduate.
Yeah.
So we knew we wanted to get that working on pretty quick after marriage. So with all the nonsense going on in the world today, which bathroom to use it in. Are you a boy? Are you a girl? We were like, I think if we need, truth be told, as parents, you have to sacrifice a little bit of what's best for you in what's best for your kids. So we felt like if we had a good chance of raising a functional adult, it would help if we had a good congregation behind us. So we simply were eyeballing churches, if nothing else, to when we did have kids, just to have, it takes a village, and we wanted to make sure we were in a village
Yep.
that knew what bathroom to go into.
Yep. I got it. And you guys, what a lot of people probably don't know is the struggles that you guys had were real. You had that desire to want to have a baby, and that was a tough road there.
Yeah, I think we'll come. I think that'd be a better window. We'll bring that topic up a little bit in just a minute, because we could probably run an entire show on that story. So
That's true.
maybe bring a little other context into it, and then I think it'll all loop back in with the story of our storm and the story of God's triumph through it.
Yeah.
I think that's really defined our life, is where the faith was, where it was going, and where it ended up, and now to see where our life is now. It's funny. I always joke, I wish God kind of treated us like the movies, and he'd give us a little preview, so he knew when crap hits the fan, we kind of know, and I know it's the whole thing about faith, that you don't know.
No.
But, when you can sit back and you see the picture as he saw it, you're like, okay, I see what you did there. That made sense.
Yeah.
That's a tough pill to swallow to a control freak like myself. So I always joke, you hear the Carrie Underwood song, Jesus Take the Wheel, I still kind of sort of have my knee on it underwards where nobody's looking.
Yep.
I may let the hands go, but my knee is definitely sneaking under that steering wheel when nobody's paying attention. So
I think we're all that way to a degree. But you guys came to our church for the football player.
Yep.
And what was it that got you the most in that?
So, I knew Jesus for a long time. I know him. I just simply knew his name and knew who he was and knew what he did for me. I didn't necessarily accept what came with knowing him. You think you get dunked in a little bit of water and your life has changed. That's, obviously I've learned that through the process of continuing to go to Momentum. But you're like, okay, well, I know him. Me and Jesus are cool. My life doesn't have to change. That's, you make that mistake. I was 15 years old. A girl that I was interested in high school was a big churchgoer. I figured if I had a shot, I better go at least pick up some of the lingo. And I went once as a teenager, liked what I saw, liked what I heard, and kind of stuck around a bit. It brings me to that church, just to not throw any muck, but some things happened. I'm one of those guys that was blessed with a brain that if I read it once, it's kind of sort of stuck in there. So
Right.
They were kind of pushing me maybe to leadership, because if we studied a Bible verse, I could spit it back out. We'd read it once, boom, I was the guy that could repeat it. So they were kind of pushing me towards being a group leader and then a team leader. And that was just the structure of that particular church. There was always this one kid, wasn't my friend, but most of my best friends were really good friends with him. So we were kind of associated together, and he had a tough life. He was into some things that that weren't the best. And, he's into drugs and sex and drinking kind of early. And our youth pastor kept pushing him away. And that kind of perplexed me. I was like, okay, the verse you just had me read completely contradicts what we're doing with this guy. Jesus didn't hang out with the cool kids. Jesus hung out with the people that were doing the bad things. And it's through those changes what made his story so great. He didn't hang out with the elite, Christians.
Yeah.
He hung out with the people that hated him the most. And I called out my youth pastor on that, and he didn't appreciate me calling him out. And that was pretty much the end of my church journey. Because every other time I'd go back into a church, it was something similar. It was just a glaring contradiction after glaring contradiction. So I'd had a bit of a bad taste for church in my mouth. What changed for me with Momentum, I'd have to play it back. But I remember praying to God, I was like, Jesus, you know how I feel. I like you, but I'm not real fond of your people. And I'm not real fond of, the houses that people go to and the settings that happen. And so if you want me and my wife here, talk to me. And he did. I remember Pastor Tim saying some things that just was like, Jesus, while you're taking requests, maybe throw me some lottery numbers. I'll do some good with it, I promise. Because I felt like he was speaking right to me.
Yeah.
They talked about, this isn't the place for people who think they got it all figured out. This isn't the place for the elite. If you're not going to come here and positively go out and try to change the world, you're in the wrong church. When the bucket's passed, if you don't feel led to give, don't. Which was weird because every church I went to was you almost had to pay to play. It was like a demanding thing, not something you should feel led to do, but you can choose not to if you so choose. So that was just everything I wanted to hear, everything I needed to hear, I heard. So that was right. I think that was the Sunday before we got married. We were married the very next Saturday. We skipped out on it. Life happened in that next year, so we didn't get a chance to come back as much as we'd like to. We wanted to. We talked about it. Your wife kind of stayed on my wife. Amber definitely was doing her fair share of stewardship, that's for sure. And it was never that we didn't want to come back, just life kept getting in the way. Life was getting complicated. And, I guess
there's
that
always
brings
an
up to the
excuse.
start of our story.
Yeah.
It was the same thing. I struggled with my weight for a lot of my life, and it's easier to make excuses than it is to make change. It's growth comes with some pain sometimes. We always think that growth is a good thing, and it ultimately is, but growth doesn't come when you're comfortable.
Right.
You have to get uncomfortable to get to truly grow and lead up to your potential. And we definitely had some of those pains.
Yeah. And so then we get
every time. Go ahead.
Then we get to that next stage, and you guys find your way back.
Yeah, so we come back. It was the very next Easter, as a matter of fact. I think we may have come to one in between. I can't remember coming more than once or twice. If we did, I wasn't paying attention or something. I was starting a new job, new career. I'd stepped away from what I was doing, which what brought me to Florida. And me even coming to Florida is a but God moment. We can touch on that later if you want. But everything that I've ever done wrong in my life, or everything that I did right in my life, every mistake that I made, specifically pushed me towards coming down here. So you look at some of the bumps and bruises I did to myself that, for 20 something years, I blamed on somebody else. All of those bumps and bruises are what pushed me to the different job. I got fired from this one from doing some stupid stuff. I got in a little bit of legal trouble with, alcohol, stupidity, nothing serious, thank God. But, just minor bumps and bruises along the road. And then, all those choices, I lost this job, I missed this interview, which pushed me to, this was about my only option was this other job. That job relocated me to Florida. The very first day I moved here, I met who ended up being my wife. Like literally, I hadn't been, my heels hadn't even gotten out of my truck, and just happenstance, we linked up. Wasn't the most romantic meeting. It was a Tinder meeting, and we all kind of know what Tinder's point is. And, Tinder did not score that evening, and I guess that's what got me interested. But, God hadn't taken over yet, so we won't get too graphic on that one. But long story short, I didn't get what I was after. I didn't get what I was after that evening, and but the union turned into what it is today, and I wouldn't change it for the world. So it's like we just talked about a minute ago. I sure wish God would send a preview, because things would make a lot more sense when you're going through them. But again, when you see through that particular chapter of your life, you look back and go, man, that was really well written. I wish I'd been a little more positive, active participant along the way.
Yeah.
But when you get to see it the way that he foresaw it, it's pretty daggum awesome.
Yep. Exactly. But also,
so back to what
mine and Amber's story is, if we'd have seen a preview of how he was going to change stuff, we might have ran, So I think not seeing a preview is probably good sometimes.
Yeah, when you're going through it, and when it's hard, you wish you could see it the way he sees it. Like you look back and you just get a little disgruntled, and you're like, man, just a little bit of help there would have been nice. But when you get back and see the whole picture and what it's completed for you, you're like, okay, I see what you did there. I got you. All right, I see what you're doing there. I see what you were trying to get me to do. I know we have free will, and I know you know what I was going to decide before I decided it. But nevertheless, if I wouldn't have had those options, I wouldn't appreciate it, or it wouldn't have changed me. It wouldn't have fixed this. It wouldn't have corrected that behavior. It wouldn't have made your heart grow. I mean, there's a million stories we could probably talk for 24 straight hours, and I wouldn't be able to get my whole story out. But nevertheless, it was all worth it in the end. So, yeah.
So you guys start coming back to church. You came back.
Yep.
So you probably were gone for one Easter. You were there one Easter, maybe came once in between that, and then you came back the next Easter. And what took place there?
So yeah, through that process, I'm not going to dive into too many details there, but we had zero. Like I said before, my wife and I we're every one of our friends' kids' aunt or uncle. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm the kid. I've been an in-home salesman for a long time, and I go into perfect stranger's house, and these kids have never met me before, and they hang on me like a jungle gym. I don't know how many products I've sold in my life where I've had a kid hanging off my leg that belonged to the homeowner I was talking to.
Right.
I must give off a scent or something. I don't know. Or maybe the fact that intellectually I'm probably about the same level as the kid. I know you can appreciate that.
I
You know,
definitely.
I may be 40. I may be 40, but I'm 40 going on 13. But nevertheless, we both knew we want to be parents, and we both were we were the two friends that most of our friends came to. We were the ones that gave the advice. People trust us. People like our opinion. The people closest to us do. So we've helped a lot of friends who accidentally got pregnant, maybe weren't ready, and all that kind of sat with us, which brings us to the start of the best part of what I believe to be the best part of our story. So we start our journey back to church. We had already been pregnant once. Um, if you don't know much about anatomy, it's very common for women's first pregnancy to not go right, because apparently I didn't know this, but medically you have the same eggs at birth that you do whenever you start to have babies. I mean, everything's the same. So, when they sit for 15, 20, 30 years before they get used, it makes sense that they're quote unquote stale. Something that's me putting
Right.
a non-doctorial spin on it. So we got pregnant pretty quick after getting married, and it failed. We got to see the heartbeat. We were about 12, 13 weeks. Everything looked good. We go in for the second run of tests, and the baby's no longer viable. At the time, I was traveling a lot for work. We were opening up an office up in Atlanta, and then we were also opening up an office in Birmingham. So it was like 1 week here, 1 week in Birmingham, 1 week in Atlanta, and then one back week here. So I wouldn't have been an active participant. So I'm one of those people that's a highly emotionally individual, but if there's enough logic, I can usually talk myself into being pretty cool about something. The logic to me was I I didn't have much of a father figure growing up. My biological father had moved away when I was young. They split. My stepdad was grew up in a pretty difficult situation, and he wasn't the most pleasant human being alive. So my mother was my father and my friend and my mom and all the above. She was my baseball coach, my everything.
Yeah.
So I knew that when it was time for me to be a parent, I wasn't going to be an absentee father. It did my life's path said that's just not possible. So I chalked it up as, hey, no big deal. I wouldn't have been a part of it. I'm cool with it. Well, obviously, a mother takes that a little differently. So that was the first real challenge as a father or as a husband I had to face was I had to be the tough one. I had to make sure that I was okay with it. So I wrapped my head in logic and loved on my wife, and everything was, we got through it. About that time, we start going back to church again, thinking, okay, that was God's way of saying. I'm not saying that God took the baby from us to get us back into church, but we kind of took it as a sign, that's
Right.
your plan was to go to church to have a better way for your kids. You're not going to church. That was kind of our wake up call. Again, I don't want that to sound like God took the baby from us to get us there, but you know,
No, but that's your reality
almost like
at that
this.
time.
Yep. And so we took that as let's get our butts back in the church. Um, we were accepted with open arms when we walked into. I mean, Momentum's a lot different than most churches you go to. This isn't a piece on please come to Momentum. This is just fact. It's definitely for the people. It's for people who have been burned by church. That's for sure. Because
Hmm.
if you expect it to be churchy, it's not. It's godly, is what it is. And it's once you see that and once you're a part of it, that statement will make more sense.
Yeah.
So we show back up. We get plugged back in. We start, listening and praying, and we really like the music. I mean, at that time, you guys were as a group. I mean, you guys were recording artists. You guys were putting out a CD. I mean, it was really cool, the production. To see a junior high or a high school, audit or a cafeteria turn into God's cathedral every Sunday was pretty daggum cool, if I must say so myself.
Yeah.
And here they are, average Joes and Jills that are putting out fantastic music, and so we just got plugged in. And pretty shortly after we came back in, the topic of small groups came up, and we joined in with a family, the Medlins. They were one of the ones that kind of started when Momentum was getting started. and we joined their small group. I believe you guys were going at first, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
That was
That's why we
one
ended
of
that.
when they were with
I thought
Brian
so.
Case and them. Yep. We
Yep,
started.
yep. Brian Case, we Preston and his wife Ellen. They got married. Come to find out, the same time we did. We met another family that was about our age, Josh and Rachel Danley, and it just was a cool environment, man. It was, you here. I got my guard up a little bit because I'm thinking it's the churchy. We're gonna get the let go, let God, just the repetitive statements that you get at all other church groups, like the stuff you don't necessarily want to hear. It's like the knee jerk react. It's like the pre-programmed answer. It wasn't like that. It was completely the opposite of what I expected it to be. It was just real people talking about real life issues, and then at the end of it, we discuss how God works in it. So it really changed. It really softened me up to God. The small groups really, really, really softened me up to God. It let me kind of take it in a little more. I didn't keep God at that, that arm's length that I'd been doing for my whole life. I didn't put up my Jason armor to protect myself from God, as dumb as that sounds. At the time, it made sense to me, because I do curse a little bit. I do have a little bit of a sharp tongue. My body is not exactly a temple, and my body is a group of temples that are glued together by Pillsbury Doughboy parts. So I knew that when it came down to it, I wasn't a perfect, what I believed a Christian should be, what the Bible says it should be. It's surface level. You read just a few chapters, you don't really dive into it. You're supposed to be this physically fit, treat your body like a temple. You're supposed to pray 50 times a day. You're supposed to not say anything bad or think bad thoughts or do all these bad things. I wasn't a bad person, but I occasionally did non-biblical things. So I never liked to wear my Jesus jersey out of fear that me being a doofus might keep somebody who was on the edge away from church. Because if we're being honest, the number one reason why people don't go to church is Christians. Yeah. We are the biggest reason.
Yeah.
So anyway, to get back to the story, the small group with the Medlins, you guys, we built such good close ties as friends that it just seemed like we were hanging out, and we were just hanging out with purpose. And some life change was starting to happen then. Fast forward a little bit. Baby number 2, we get to tell the group, baby number 2's here. A lot of praying with the group. The very first thing we did was a family piece. And we prayed and prayed and prayed, and poof, we get pregnant. Awesome. Same thing happens exactly the same time. 12 weeks, perfect heartbeat. Doctor said everything looks good. Go back for the next checkup. Exact same time frame, baby's dead again. I mean, wife's devastated. I remember her, coming home and me and her crying over the stick test and, positive. She's got 4 of them in her hand. We're super excited. Keep in mind, we have still counseled friends that didn't want kids that are on their 2nd and 3rd and 4th that I don't say don't want them. That's not what, please take that.
Right.
Don't take that literally. They weren't prepared for them, weren't ready for them. It wasn't on their radar. So that's kind of the devil working on me a little bit, So number 2, same thing. I still been traveling a little bit, so I was able to logic my way through it. Obviously, it crushes my wife again. Trying to find that balance, because I tend to be Mr. Fix-It. Somebody comes and complains to me about something, I tend to fix it because I've been a sales manager at every job, so it's usually my job to handle problems.
Right.
So that's my first nature. And if you know anything about women, which I don't know much, but I know a little bit more than the average person, most of the time when they're complaining, they don't want it fixed. They just want to get it off their chest. They just want to be heard. So it's like I'm having to chew on my cheek and stomp on my toe so I don't try to fix, because I know that's not what she wants. She just wants a shoulder to cry on and know that she's got somebody there that believes in her and knows everything will be okay. That's tough for me because that's not necessarily my nature. But that's what my wife needed, so that's what I did. So I internalized another one. At that point in time, get a little chippy. Some of my conversations with God were, why us? I'm a little confused here. Everybody tells us what great parents we're supposed to be. Hey, can you watch our kids for us? We're just that family, right? And so I'm starting to get a little animosity, like, why us? Like, whatever story you're trying to tell me here, I'm not understanding. Please make it more clear. Baby number 3 comes. Same result. The only thing difference was we had fired the previous OBGYN because some things happened. We're not going to dive into it. I don't want to muck anybody through the mud, but he wasn't a pleasant human being. And he had no desire. He's like, oh, you're 30 something years old, you're mid 30s. This kind of stuff happens. Just deal with it. I mean, he basically was just like, just deal with it. It's not the words he used, but he was that doctor that doesn't have the bedside manner. We've all encountered that or see him play on our favorite TV shows or whatever.
Yep.
So we fired him, moved on to the next one. These guys were special fertility people, and fertility wasn't our issue. I mean, there for a while. Anytime me and my wife had husband and wife time, we were pretty much able to put a butt in the oven, for lack of a better term. That wasn't our issue. We just couldn't keep one. Baby number 3 comes. This was the next OBGYN was a women's group, so it was all women doctors in there, and they were a little more emotionally warming. And they were, hey, this is great sign, great heartbeat. When they look like this, the percentage of chance of losing the baby is slim to none. So now my guard is down. Where I was strong the first 2
Right.
times, I let myself be okay. Like, this is the one. That's what I heard. Whether that's, I don't know if I heard that or I made it up in my head. I don't really, you know how that goes. And baby number 3 gets here, and we make it a little farther this time than we had. And doctor's like, yep, everything looks great. And this is a specialty OBGYN. This isn't just a standard one. So I'm like, okay, special is in their name. They must be better at their job. Cool, it's okay. Let my guard down, relax. Sure enough, same thing happens again. This time, all the logic that I had, I'd quit traveling. Job had me home. I was there for every meeting. And, that one crushed me. I remember sitting at the doctor's office, and I was about ready to flip over a table. Old football, drunken doofus Jason showed back up for a minute. And I remember wailing to God and cursing him out. And, I definitely, it's a good thing he doesn't keep recollection of right and longs. Otherwise, I'd be sitting on his lap when my day is done, and we'll probably have a good couple-hour conversation about those days. But I remember, just being extremely angry with God to the point where I didn't want to go back to church. I didn't want to go back to group. I sent a long email out to the group. Something told me just push through it and just go. I wrote everybody kind of a pre-apologetic, hey, look, things aren't good in our godly world. I feel like we need to show up because we've grown bonds. We're all relying on each other. But I swear to you, if any one of you says, let go, let God, or if any one of you says God doesn't put more on you than you can handle, the churchy answers, I'm going to lose it. So out of respect, can we just pretend that none of this happened? Let's just move on like none of this have ever happened, and maybe we can continue to come. I remember getting up. I'll never forget it. It was the very first time our church sang the song "Whisper." Where Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. It gets repeated a lot. You make the darkness tremble. I remember getting up during that song. While I really enjoyed the song, and the singer, Madison, it was just a fantastic singer.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember hearing just the first time, just kind of sort of that almost weeping Jesus, Jesus, because she did really good. Her voice controls. I remember getting up and going out in the hallway, and I was ready to if I wasn't in public, I'd have been breaking stuff. Like, it just broke something in me. And I was angry, very, very angry. Like, I can't praise this man. I can't praise him right now. I can't. He keeps killing, we're losing these babies, and look what it's doing to my wife. And it would never hurt our marriage. I will say that, we grew closer because of that. I will say that losing the babies, sometimes blame starts happening back and forth. You didn't eat the right thing. You weren't home on time, and you stressed me out. There's so many easy ways to point fingers. Luckily, that never happened with my wife and I. We actually grew stronger into this loss that actually fortified our relationship even more than it already was. But I remember arguing with our group leader, Daryl Medlin, at the time, and he went toe-to-toe with me. Again, I'm a salesman. I can argue with the best of them. It's a skill I use to feed my family. So I'm very hard to argue with. I'm very difficult to negotiate with, because not only was I good at it before I learned how to do it scientifically. I was very good. I'm even better at it emotionally. And every negative thing I spotted him, Daryl had an answer back, and that kind of shook me loose. So I remember after that, it opened our heart back to being okay with church again. We never stopped going. I mean, I'm sure we missed a week here and there due to life, but we never stopped going because we didn't want to go. We were right back to where we were in square one, where we didn't want to go to church.